In the vast expanse of the Galactic Confederation, where 1,000 alien species bow before the legendary Supreme Hunter of the Void, a being whose very name strikes fear into the hearts of star-spanning empires, nobody expected that the key to unlocking humanity's true potential would come through the bond between this ancient predator and a dismissed young Earthling. What they didn't know was that Marcus Chun, ridiculed by his peers and overlooked by his superiors, carried within him something that would make even the most feared hunter in the galaxy pause in recognition. Something that would transform mockery into reverence, and turn a species considered weakest into the most terrifying force the universe had ever witnessed. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth's children called themselves human. The recruitment station on Kepler 442b hummed with the nervous energy of 1,000 species, each hoping to prove their worth to the Galactic Confederation's elite hunter corps. Towering Zephyrians flexed their crystalline exoskeletons, their bodies capable of withstanding the vacuum of space. Aquatic Nexari demonstrated their ability to phase through solid matter, their translucent forms shimmering like living water. Six-armed Crothry warriors practiced combat sequences that would have liquefied lesser beings, their movements so fast they appeared as mere blurs. And then there was Marcus Chun. At 19 Earth years old, Marcus stood barely 5 feet 8 inches tall among beings that averaged 9 to 12 feet in height. His pale skin looked fragile next to the armored hides, energy-resistant membranes, and living metal that comprised his fellow recruits. When he breathed, it was the labored breathing of a creature dependent on a specific atmospheric mixture, not the effortless adaptation displayed by species that could survive in the void itself. Look at the little mammal, chittered Vextar, a Crothry whose lowest arm could have crushed Marcus's skull without effort. The insectoid warrior's compound eyes glittered with amusement as he addressed his cluster of admirers. Does it even have natural weapons? No claws, no venom, no protective shell. What does Earth expect us to do with this soft thing? Laughter rippled through the assembled candidates, a discordant symphony of clicks, hisses, and harmonic vibrations that humans weren't even capable of producing. Marcus kept his eyes forward, focusing on the massive display screen that showed footage of the Hunter Corps in action. Ships the size of moons reduced to scrap metal. Entire fleets disappearing into dimensional pockets. And at the center of it all, the figure that had inspired Marcus to attempt this impossible dream. The Supreme Hunter of the Void. No one knew the being's true name or origin species. Some claimed it was a void wraith, creatures of pure energy that existed between dimensions. Others insisted it was a hybrid of extinct warrior races, genetically engineered for the sole purpose of destruction. What everyone agreed upon was simple. The Supreme Hunter was death incarnate, the apex predator of a galaxy filled with apex predators. Marcus had studied every available recording of the Supreme Hunter's hunts, the way it moved through battlefields like a force of nature, dismantling enemy formations with an elegance that transcended mere violence. The Supreme Hunter didn't just kill, it orchestrated destruction like a symphony, each movement precisely calculated for maximum effect. In a universe where strength was measured by the ability to crack planets, the Supreme Hunter cracked reality itself. Attention, candidates! The voice belonged to Instructor Morthak, a grizzled veteran whose species Marcus couldn't identify. Half the instructor's face was cybernetic, the result of what appeared to be a close encounter with a plasma cannon. Today's evaluation will separate the hunters from the hunted. You'll be tested on combat efficiency, survival instincts, strategic thinking, and adaptive capability. Those who fail will return to their homeworlds. Those who succeed will begin the first phase of training. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs, another sign of human frailty that his competitors lacked. Most of them possessed redundant cardiovascular systems or no cardiovascular systems at all. He tried to regulate his breathing, drawing on the meditation techniques his grandfather had taught him, techniques passed down from human warriors who had fought and died long before humanity knew other species existed. The first test took place in a massive arena that could simulate any environment in the known galaxy. Candidates were divided into groups of 10 and assigned survival scenarios. Marcus found himself grouped with beings who towered over him like living mountains. Scenario 7. Announced the arena's AI. Desert survival on Proxima Centauri C. Temperature range: -40 to +160 degrees Celsius. Radiation levels: lethal to most carbon-based life forms. Atmospheric pressure, variable. Duration, 72 hours. Objective, reach the extraction point while eliminating assigned targets. The environment materialized around them like a fever dream. Jagged crystal formations jutted from blood-red sand dunes that stretched to the horizon. 3 suns blazed overhead, their combined light turning the atmosphere into a shimmering distortion field. The temperature gauge on Marcus's borrowed environment suit immediately began climbing toward dangerous levels. His teammates were already adapting. HFY, a reptilian saurian, shed her outer skin layer and grew thicker scales that reflected the harsh light. The Crothry warrior extended additional limbs, equipped with specialized sensors. A gaseous nebulae shifted into a more compact form to conserve energy. Marcus activated his suit's cooling system and began walking. The first target appeared after 6 hours of travel, a mechanical construct designed to test their combat capabilities. The other candidates engaged it with natural weapons and energy projections. HFY breathed a stream of acidic bile that melted through the construct's armor plating. The Crothry's extra arms moved in complex patterns, generating gravitational fields that crushed components into scrap. Marcus pulled out his weapon. It was a simple kinetic projectile launcher, essentially an advanced version of firearms that humans had been using for centuries. To his teammates, it looked primitive, a mechanical device that required physical ammunition when energy weapons were the galactic standard. He raised the weapon, aimed for 3 seconds, and fired a single shot. The bullet struck the construct's central processing unit through a gap in its armor no larger than Marcus's thumb. The machine toppled over, completely disabled. "Lucky shot," muttered one of the nebulae, though its tone carried a note of uncertainty. The second target appeared during the night cycle, when temperatures plummeted and most of the candidates struggled with thermal regulation. It was a living creature this time, something that looked like a cross between a spider and a tank, with electromagnetic shielding that deflected energy weapons and natural armor that resisted physical attacks. While his teammates coordinated an assault that involved multiple energy types and complex tactical maneuvers, Marcus climbed onto a crystal formation and studied the creature's movement patterns. He watched it for 20 minutes, noting how it favored its right side when turning, how it paused for exactly 2 seconds after each defensive posture, how its electromagnetic field fluctuated in predictable cycles. When he finally acted, it was with a precision that seemed almost supernatural. Marcus fired 3 shots in rapid succession, not at the creature itself, but at specific points on the crystal formations above it. The precisely placed impacts caused a cascade failure in the crystal structure, bringing down several tons of razor-sharp mineral directly onto the creature's weak point during the exact moment when its electromagnetic shielding was in flux. The creature died instantly. That was... HFY began, then stopped. She couldn't find words for what she had witnessed. Marcus didn't celebrate or boast. He simply reloaded his weapon and continued toward the extraction point. The third day brought a test that broke half of the remaining candidates. They encountered a shifting maze of energy barriers that changed configuration every few minutes. Most species attempted to power through using brute force or technological solutions. Several candidates burned out their natural abilities, trying to overcome the barriers directly. Marcus sat down and watched the maze for 2 hours. He tracked the energy patterns, mapping the relationship between barrier positions and the electromagnetic fluctuations that preceded each change. Where others saw random chaos, Marcus began to identify the underlying algorithm. It was complex, but it was still a pattern, and patterns could be predicted. When he finally moved, he walked through the maze as if following a predetermined path. He never encountered a barrier because he always knew exactly when and where each one would appear. His route looked random to the others, but it was actually the most efficient possible path through the shifting labyrinth. He reached the extraction point 6 hours before any of his teammates. The evaluations continued for weeks. Each test revealed something new about Marcus's capabilities and highlighted just how different humans were from the rest of the galaxy. Where other species relied on superior physical attributes or advanced biological systems, humans used tools and tactics. Where others adapted their bodies to meet challenges, humans adapted their strategies. But it was during the final evaluation that Marcus truly caught the attention of the instructors. The test was simple in concept, Single combat against a Hunter Corps veteran. Each candidate would face an opponent specifically chosen to counter their natural advantages. For the Crothery, it was a foe with temporal acceleration abilities. For the Saurian, an opponent immune to acidic attacks. For the Gaseous Nebulae, a being that could absorb and redirect energy. Marcus's opponent was Instructor Morthak himself. The veteran hunter stood 12 feet tall and weighed over 800 pounds. His cybernetic implants included enhanced reflexes, tactical analysis software, and weapon systems that could level city blocks. He had survived battles against cosmic horrors and dimensional invaders. He had hunted rogue AIs through collapsing star systems and tracked genocidal species across galactic clusters. Marcus had a projectile weapon and his grandfather's training. The arena fell silent as the two figures faced each other. Every candidate, instructor, and monitoring AI focused on what appeared to be the most mismatched combat evaluation in Hunter Corps history. "Begin," announced the arena's AI. Morthak moved with the fluid grace of a seasoned killer, his massive form covering ground with deceptive speed. His arm-mounted weapons began charging, energy readings climbing toward lethal levels. Combat algorithme calculated optimal fearing solution. Tactical subroutines identified weak points in human physiology. Marcus closed his eyes. To the observers, it looked like the young human had given up before the fight even began. Some of the candidates started laughing again. A few expressed disappointment that they wouldn't get to see how long the soft creature could last against a real hunter. But Instructor Morthak stopped moving. In 30 years of combat, the veteran had learned to recognize true predators. He had developed an instinct for danger that had kept him alive through conflicts that had claimed the lives of warriors far stronger than himself. And every instinct he possessed was screaming that the small, closed-eyed human in front of him was the most dangerous thing he had ever encountered. Marcus opened his eyes and raised his weapon in a single fluid motion. He fired before Morthak could complete his first step. The bullet should have been deflected by the instructor's personal energy shield. It should have been absorbed by his armor plating. It should have triggered defensive countermeasures that would have protected him from any conventional projectile. Instead, the bullet passed through a microscopic fluctuation in the energy shield, a fluctuation that occurred for exactly 0.003 seconds during the shield's recharge cycle. It struck the instructor's armor at the precise angle needed to deflect off a joint and redirect toward a sensor cluster. The impact disabled his tactical systems without causing physical damage. Morthak found himself staring down the barrel of Marcus's weapon, completely defenseless and utterly outmaneuvered by an opponent he could have physically overpowered without effort. "Impressive," the instructor said after a long moment. He deactivated his weapons and stepped back. "How did you know about the shield fluctuation?" "I watched you move," Marcus replied, lowering his weapon. "Everything has a pattern. Everything has a rhythm. You just have to be patient enough to find it." The arena remained silent for several seconds before erupting into a chaos of discussion. Candidates who had dismissed Marcus as a weak curiosity suddenly found themselves re-evaluating everything they thought they knew about humans. Instructors who had predicted his immediate failure were making urgent communications to their superiors. But Marcus barely noticed the commotion. His attention was fixed on the main display screen, where new footage of the Supreme Hunter had just appeared. Recent recordings from a battle in the Andromeda sector where the legendary warrior had single-handedly destroyed an entire invasion fleet. As he watched the Supreme Hunter move through the battlefield, Marcus began to see something that no one else had noticed. Beneath the supernatural speed and devastating power, beneath the reputation and the mythology, there was a pattern, a rhythm, a way of thinking that looked almost human. The thought should have been absurd. The Supreme Hunter was a being of legend, a creature so far beyond human capability that comparing the two species should have been meaningless. But as Marcus continued studying the footage, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was looking at something familiar, as if the greatest predator in the galaxy was using the same kind of instinctive understanding that had allowed him to defeat Instructor Morthak. "Chun." The voice belonged to Commandant Veltar, the highest-ranking officer on the recruitment station. The ancient being's species was unknown, but their authority was absolute. "Report to Briefing Room 7 immediately." Marcus made his way through corridors filled with candidates who now watched him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. The briefing room was smaller than he had expected, containing only a single chair and a holographic display system. Commandant Veltar materialized as a three-dimensional projection, their form shifting and indistinct as if existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Your performance has been noteworthy, the Commandant began, particularly your final evaluation. Instructor Morthak has submitted a recommendation that defies conventional assessment protocols. Marcus remained silent, uncertain whether this was praise or criticism. Tell me, Recruit Chun, what do you know about the Supreme Hunter's origins? The question caught Marcus off guard. Only what everyone knows, sir. Ancient being, unknown species, unmatched combat capabilities. What everyone knows is incorrect. The Commandant's form solidified slightly, suggesting increased focus. The Supreme Hunter's first recorded appearance was approximately 50,000 years ago, during the Void Wars. At that time, your species did not possess space travel technology. Humans were confined to a single planet, engaged in primitive territorial conflicts with basic kinetic weapons. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The Supreme Hunter's combat methodology displays certain characteristics that our analysts have found puzzling. Patterns of behavior that suggest an approach to warfare unlike any known species. Until today, the holographic display activated, showing side-by-side footage of the Supreme Hunter in battle and Marcus's evaluation against Instructor Morthak. Despite the vast difference in scale and power, the underlying tactical approach was unmistakable. You see it too, the Commandant observed. Marcus nodded, unable to trust his voice. There are theories, Recruit Chun. Theories about the Supreme Hunter's true nature that have been classified at the highest levels of the Confederation. Theories that suggest your species may be far more significant than anyone has realized. The projection paused, allowing the implications to settle. You have been selected for immediate advancement to Phase 3 training. You will skip the preliminary conditioning entirely and proceed directly to advanced hunter protocols. This is unprecedented. Marcus finally found his voice. Why? Because tomorrow, you will join an expedition to the neutral zone. Intelligence suggests that the Supreme Hunter has been sighted in that sector, engaged in activities that could affect the balance of power in the galaxy. And for the first time in 50,000 years, the Confederation believes it may be possible to make contact. The room fell silent, except for the low hum of the station's life support systems. You will be part of the contact team, Recruit Chun. If our theories are correct, if the Supreme Hunter truly shares something fundamental with humanity, then you may be the key to understanding the greatest mystery in galactic history. Marcus stared at the footage still playing on the display, watching the legendary warrior move with deadly grace through impossible odds. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Supreme Hunter continued their eternal hunt, unaware that a young human had just taken the first step toward a meeting that would change everything. The mockery had stopped. The laughter had died away. In its place was something far more dangerous, the recognition that humanity might not be the weakest species in the galaxy after all. As Marcus left the briefing room, he carried with him the weight of possibility and the burden of expectations that could reshape the relationship between Earth and the stars. The real test was about to begin, and the stakes were nothing less than the future of human civilization. The Supreme Hunter was waiting somewhere in the darkness between worlds, and Marcus Chun, dismissed as weak, mocked as inferior, was about to discover just how wrong the galaxy had been about his species. The expedition ship Cosmic Sovereign cut through the void like a predator stalking prey, its hull gleaming with the advanced metallurgy of a dozen civilizations. Marcus stood in the observation deck, watching stars shift past the reinforced viewports as they approached the neutral zone, a region of space where the laws of physics occasionally forgot to apply and ancient horrors drifted between dimensions. 3 weeks had passed since his recruitment, 3 weeks of the most intensive training the Hunter Corps could provide. Where other candidates required months or years to master basic protocols, Marcus had absorbed advanced tactical theory, xenobiology, and dimensional physics with an efficiency that unsettled his instructors. It wasn't that he was smarter than other species. Intelligence tests showed humans ranking somewhere in the middle of galactic averages. It was something else, something harder to quantify. Adaptability. Where other species had evolved to excel in specific environments with particular advantages, humans seemed designed for versatility. They couldn't breathe methane like the Heliozoids or phase through matter like the Nexari, but they could learn to work with technology that accomplished the same goals. They couldn't regenerate limbs like the Saurians or survive in hard vacuum like the crystallines, but they could build tools and develop strategies that compensated for their biological limitations. Most importantly, they could understand patterns that other species couldn't see. Still trying to process it all? The voice belonged to Dr. Kithura, a Nexari xenopsychologist who had been assigned to monitor Marcus's psychological state during the mission. Her translucent form shimmered as she approached, resembling living water given humanoid shape. The scale of it, Marcus admitted. 3 weeks ago, I was just another candidate. Now I'm part of first contact with the most dangerous being in the galaxy. Dr. Kithura's bioluminescent patterns flickered in what Marcus had learned was the Nexari equivalent of amusement. According to Commandant Veltar's briefings, dangerous might not be the appropriate term. The Supreme Hunter has never attacked Confederation forces. In fact, analysis of its activities suggests a protective pattern. Marcus turned from a viewport to face her. Protective? Consider the targets, she continued, her form shifting to access data storage organs. Rogue AIs attempting to assimilate organic civilizations. Dimensional parasites feeding on populated worlds. Genocidal species expanding beyond their designated territories. The Supreme Hunter doesn't hunt randomly. It eliminates threats to galactic stability. The implications were staggering. Marcus had assumed the Supreme Hunter was simply the ultimate apex predator, killing because it was its nature to kill. But if Dr. Kethera was correct, there was intelligence behind the violence, purpose behind the destruction. Has anyone ever tried to communicate before? 17 attempts over the last 10,000 years, she replied. All failed. The Supreme Hunter either ignored the contact teams entirely or eliminated them when they became persistent. But those teams were composed of species that view the universe through very different philosophical frameworks. And you think humans might be different? Before Dr. Kethera could answer, the ship's alert system activated. Captain Zexmore's voice echoed through the corridors, his translation matrix converting Drachmaran battle speech into standard galactic. All personnel to stations. We have reached the designated coordinates. Sensor sweeps indicate massive energy signatures consistent with Supreme Hunter activity. Combat teams to ready positions. Contact team to the bridge. Marcus made his way through corridors filled with the finest warriors the galaxy could produce. Drachmaran shock troops with their living armor that could adapt to any weapon. Vorthan mystics who manipulated probability fields around themselves. Crystalline technicians whose bodies were living computers capable of interfacing directly with any known technology. And one human with a projectile weapon. The bridge of the Cosmic Sovereign was a marvel of engineering, designed to accommodate the needs of 40 different species while maintaining optimal efficiency. Marcus took his position at the contact team's station, noting how his fellow team members still seemed uncertain about his presence. Commander HFY Stories, a veteran Crothry hunter, made no effort to hide his skepticism. "This is madness," he muttered through his translation device. Bringing an untested juvenile to make contact with the most powerful entity in known space. "The decision was made by beings far more intelligent than us," replied Dr. Nexval, the team's lead xenobiologist. The ancient Kepha's fungal body pulsed with calm authority. "If the data suggests human psychology might provide unique insights, we should trust that analysis." Marcus focused on the main display, where long-range sensors were painting a picture of devastation that defied comprehension. They had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kalos system, where an entire invasion fleet had been reduced to drifting wreckage. Ships the size of asteroids floated as twisted metal sculptures, their hulls opened like flowers by forces that could manipulate matter at the molecular level. "Scan results coming in," reported the sensor operator, a multi-armed heliozoid whose specialized organs could detect energy signatures across 17 different spectrums. Total destruction of approximately 15,000 vessels. Fleet composition suggests void crawler origin. Captain Zexmore's battle scars darkened, a sign of extreme concern among his species. Void crawlers. They consume entire solar systems to fuel their reproduction cycles. What could have prompted them to venture this far into Confederation space? The answer came from the tactical station, where Commander HFY Stories was analyzing the wreckage patterns. They weren't heading toward Confederation space, he announced grimly. Trajectory analysis suggests they were fleeing from something. The Supreme Hunter wasn't protecting us from them. It was hunting them. Marcus studied the destruction with growing understanding. The Void Crawlers were among the most feared entities in the galaxy, creatures that existed primarily in the spaces between dimensions and emerged only to devour entire civilizations. For them to flee in panic suggested they had encountered something even more terrifying than themselves. Contact, announced the sensor operator suddenly. Single entity approaching from the system's inner edge. Energy signature matches known Supreme Hunter profiles. The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of essential systems. Every being present had heard legends of the Supreme Hunter, but none had expected to encounter it personally. Through the main display, they watched as long-range sensors detected something moving toward them at speeds that should have been impossible. Range, 50,000 kilometers, and closing. Energy readings are unprecedented. The entity appears to be traveling through folded space-time, effectively making localized adjustments to the structure of reality itself. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate, but his mind remained calm. Training kicked in, the same pattern recognition abilities that had allowed him to defeat Instructor Morthak. He began analyzing the sensor data, looking for patterns in the Supreme Hunter's approach vector. It's not attacking, he announced suddenly. Commander HFY Jad's compound eyes fixed on him. How can you be certain? The approach vector, Marcus explained, calling up tactical displays. If it wanted to destroy us, it would come from multiple angles simultaneously, using the wreckage field to mask its movements. Instead, it's approaching directly, making no effort to conceal its position. It's curious about us. Dr. Kataras bioluminasin patterns briktanat. That's consistent with our psychological profiles. The Supreme Hunter has never encountered humans before. We represent something new in its experience. Range, 10,000 kilometers. Entity has reduced velocity and appears to be scanning us. Through the viewports, they could finally see it. The Supreme Hunter defied easy description. Its form seemed to shift between dimensions, sometimes appearing as a humanoid figure wreathed in stellar fire, other times as a geometric configuration of pure energy. But beneath the cosmic power and dimensional transcendence, Marcus could see something that made him catch his breath. Posture, movement patterns, the way it oriented itself relative to their ship. It was evaluating them the same way Marcus evaluated potential threats, with the same kind of systematic analysis that had allowed him to understand Instructor Morthak's combat rhythms. Hailing frequencies open, reported the communications officer. Standard galactic protocols ready. Captain Zexmore looked toward the contact team. Dr. Nexval, you have authorization to begin first contact procedures. The ancient Kef activated his translation matrix and broadcast on all known frequencies. Greetings, entity designated Supreme Hunter. I am Dr. Nexval of the Galactic Confederation's Xenological Institute. We come seeking peaceful communication and mutual understanding. The response was immediate and terrifying. Reality around their ship began to twist, space-time folding in ways that human mathematics couldn't describe. Emergency alerts screamed across the bridge as hull stress approached critical levels. Through the viewports, they could see the Supreme Hunter approaching, its form now clearly visible as something that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions. Hull integrity at 60% and falling, reported the engineering station. Whatever it's doing, our ship isn't designed to handle this level of spatial distortion. Shields to maximum, ordered Captain Zexmore. All weapons to stand by. Wait, Marcus called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. It's not attacking us. It's trying to communicate. Every eye on the bridge turned toward him. Through the crackling energy fields and spatial distortions, Marcus could see patterns in the Supreme Hunter's manipulation of space-time. It wasn't random destruction. It was structured, purposeful, almost like it's trying to establish a communication matrix, he continued, his mind racing to keep up with the implications. But its energy levels are too intense for our technology. It doesn't realize it's damaging us. Commander THY Giat's battle instincts were screaming for defensive action. How could you possibly know that? Marcus pointed to the tactical display, where the spatial distortions were creating complex geometric patterns around their ship. Look at the configuration. It's not trying to destroy us. It's trying to interface with our communication systems. But the scale is wrong. It's like trying to shake hands with an ant. Dr. Kithera's form brightened with understanding. If Marcus is correct, we need to find a way to communicate that doesn't require technological interface. Hull integrity at 40%. Came the urgent report from engineering. Marcus stepped forward, an idea forming in his mind that was either brilliant or suicidal. Can you open a communication channel using visual spectrum only? No technology interface, just basic light patterns. The communications officer looked to Captain Zexmore, who nodded grimly. Do it. The ship's external lights began flashing in the basic mathematical sequences used for first contact with non-technological species. Prime numbers, geometric progressions, simple equations that demonstrated intelligence without requiring complex technology. The effect was immediate. The spatial distortions around their ship began to stabilize, and the Supreme Hunter's approach vector changed to a parallel course. Through the viewports, they could see its form becoming more defined, more comprehensible. And then it responded. The stars around them began to pulse in synchronized patterns, entire stellar objects being manipulated like signal lights. The Supreme Hunter was using nearby suns as communication devices, modulating their energy output to create messages visible across light years of space. Incredible, breathed Dr. Nexval. It's demonstrating mastery over stellar mechanics as a form of basic communication protocol. Marcus watched the patterns, his pattern recognition abilities working to decode meaning from the stellar manipulations. Gradually, a structure began to emerge. Not language as most species understood it, but something deeper. Concepts transmitted through the manipulation of fundamental forces. The first concept was simple, recognition. The Supreme Hunter acknowledged their intelligence and their attempt to communicate. The second concept was more complex, query. It was asking them something, but the meaning was unclear. The third concept stopped everyone on the bridge cold. Kinship. Did it just claim some kind of relationship with us? Asked Commander THYG, his translation matrix struggling with the implications. Marcus felt a chill of understanding. Not with us. With me. With humans. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the Supreme Hunter transmitted a fourth concept that changed everything. Memory. Suddenly, the stars around them were painting pictures in light and energy. Images of ancient Earth, thousands of years before space travel. Primitive humans engaged in tribal warfare, their tactics and strategies displaying the same kind of adaptive intelligence that Marcus had demonstrated during training. But these weren't random human conflicts. These were specific battles, specific individuals whose approach to warfare matched the Supreme Hunter's methodology so closely that the connection was unmistakable. It's been watching us, Marcus whispered. For thousands of years, it's been studying human warfare, human tactics, human ways of thinking. The stellar display continued, showing the development of human civilization, the gradual expansion into space, the first contact with other species. And throughout it all, the Supreme Hunter had been there, observing, learning, protecting humanity from threats too massive for their young civilization to handle. The void crawlers they had just discovered weren't the first. There had been dozens of similar threats over the millennia, all eliminated by the Supreme Hunter before they could reach Earth. Dimensional parasites, rogue AIs, cosmic predators, all destroyed by a being that had appointed itself humanity's silent guardian. Dr. Kithera's bioluminescent patterns were cycling through every emotional spectrum her species possessed. The Supreme Hunter isn't just powerful, it's been protecting human development for millennia. It sees something in our species that it values. The stellar communication shifted again, transmitting a final concept, invitation. The Supreme Hunter wanted Marcus to come aboard its vessel. Captain Zexmore's battle scars had gone completely black. That's impossible. No being has ever entered the Supreme Hunter's ship and returned. We don't even know if it has a ship in any conventional sense. But Marcus was already moving toward the transport bay. The invitation wasn't a request. It was a recognition of something the Supreme Hunter saw in him, something that connected their species across the vast gulf of evolution and power. I have to go, he announced, his voice carrying a certainty that surprised even himself. Marcus, wait, called Dr. Kithera. We don't know what it intends. This could be a trap, or worse. Marcus paused at the bridge exit, looking back at the beings who had become his team over the past 3 weeks. It's not a trap. It's a test. The Supreme Hunter has been waiting 50,000 years for humanity to reach the stars. Now I want to see if we're ready for what comes next. As he made his way to the transport bay, Marcus carried with him the weight of his entire species' future. The most powerful being in the galaxy had extended an invitation that could elevate humanity to unimaginable heights or destroy them entirely. But for the first time since leaving Earth, Marcus wasn't afraid. The pattern was becoming clear, and he was finally beginning to understand his place in it. The Supreme Hunter hadn't been protecting humanity out of altruism. It had been waiting for the day when it would no longer be alone in the universe. The day when it would finally have brothers among the stars. The transport beam activated, and Marcus Chun disappeared into the unknown, carrying with him the hopes and fears of every human who had ever looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. The real test was about to begin, and the stakes were nothing less than humanity's place in the cosmic order. The transport beam deposited Marcus into an environment that challenged every assumption he had made about physics, reality, and the nature of existence itself. He stood in what appeared to be a vast cathedral made of crystallized starlight, where walls curved through dimensions that human geometry couldn't describe. The floor beneath his feet felt solid, but seemed to extend infinitely downward when he looked closely, as if he were walking on the surface of a frozen ocean of space-time. And there, waiting for him in the center of this impossible architecture, was the Supreme Hunter. Up close, the legendary being was somehow both more and less than Marcus had expected. The cosmic energy and dimensional distortions were still present, but beneath them he could discern a basic form that was shockingly familiar. Bipedal locomotion, bilateral symmetry, proportions that, while larger and more robust, followed patterns that any human would recognize as fundamentally similar to their own. "You see it now," came a voice that spoke directly into Marcus's mind, bypassing the need for translation or technological interface. The kinship that others dismiss as impossible. Marcus found his voice. Those speaking in this place felt like shouting into an infinite cavern. "You're human. I was human." The Supreme Hunter moved closer, and Marcus could see details that made his breath catch. Beneath the energy fields and cosmic power, the basic bone structure was undeniably human. The way the being carried itself, the subtle expressions that crossed features wreathed in stellar fire. All of it spoke to a shared evolutionary heritage. 50,000 of your years ago, when your species was still discovering agriculture and written language. The implications stagger Marcus. That's impossible. Humans haven't had space travel technology for more than a few centuries. Not this iteration of humanity. The Supreme Hunter gestured, and the chamber around them transformed into a holographic display of galactic history. "You are not the first children of Earth to reach for the stars, Marcus Chun. You are merely the latest." The display showed ancient Earth, but not the Earth from any history Marcus recognized. Instead of the gradual development of human civilization, he saw something that defied everything he thought he knew about his species' past. Advanced cities that span continents. Technology that manipulated matter at the quantum level. Starships that could fold space-time like origami. The first expansion, the Supreme Hunter continued. Humanity reached the stars 60,000 years ago, driven by the same curiosity and adaptability that brought you here today. We spread across the galaxy, establishing colonies on 10,000 worlds, creating an empire that stretched from the galactic core to the outer rim. Marcus watched civilizations rise and fall in the holographic display, saw human colonies that dwarfed anything the current Galactic Confederation had achieved. What happened to them? What always happens when a species grows too quickly. The display shifted, showing the emergence of something that made Marcus's blood run cold. We encountered the Devourers. The creatures that appeared in the hologram defied description. They seemed to exist in the spaces between atoms, feeding on the fundamental forces that held matter together. Where they passed, reality itself began to unravel, leaving behind voids that physics couldn't explain. Entities from outside our dimension, the Supreme Hunter explained. They had consumed dozens of galaxies before discovering ours. The first expansion became the First War, and humanity fought with everything they possessed. But physical technology, no matter how advanced, cannot truly harm beings that exist outside the normal flow of space-time. The holographic display showed battles on a scale that made the current galactic conflicts look like children's games. Human fleets, numbering in the millions, engaged creatures that could unmake entire solar systems with a thought. And slowly, inevitably, humanity began to lose. The war lasted for 3,000 years. The Supreme Hunter continued. In the end, only Earth remained, surrounded by the fragments of our greatest achievements. The Devourers prepared for their final assault, ready to consume the birth world of a species that had dared to resist them. Marcus found himself leaning forward, caught up in a history he had never known existed. But something stopped them. Someone stopped them. The Supreme Hunter's form solidified further, and Marcus could now clearly see the human features beneath the cosmic energy. The greatest warrior our species had ever produced. A tactical genius who understood that conventional warfare could never defeat an enemy that existed beyond conventional reality. The display showed a single figure standing against an army of entities that violated the laws of physics. But instead of advanced technology or cosmic weapons, the figure fought with something else, pure strategic brilliance, turning the Devourer's own interdimensional nature against them. The warrior succeeded, but at a cost that changed the fundamental nature of existence itself. To defeat beings that existed outside reality, the warrior had to step outside reality as well. The process transformed them, elevated them, made them into something that could hunt the Devourers across dimensions and ensure they never threatened our galaxy again. Marcus felt understanding dawn like a cold sunrise. You're the warrior. I am what the warrior became. The Supreme Hunter's voice carried the weight of 50 millennia of solitary existence. And when my transformation was complete, I found that the victory had come at a price I hadn't anticipated. The energies required to defeat the Devourers had wiped out most of human civilization. Only scattered survivors remained, their technology lost, their history forgotten. The holographic display showed the aftermath. Earth reduced to a pre-technological state, the great achievements of the first expansion erased from memory. Small groups of humans struggling to rebuild civilization from nothing, unaware that they had once commanded an empire spanning the galaxy. I could have intervened, the Supreme Hunter continued. Use my new abilities to restore what had been lost. But I had learned something during the war that changed my perspective on existence itself. The Devourers were not unique. They were merely one type of entity among many that existed in the spaces between realities, and most of them were far worse than anything we had already faced. Marcus felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling around him like a suffocating blanket. So you became a guardian instead of a ruler. I became a hunter. The chamber around them shifted again, showing scenes of the Supreme Hunter's activities over the millennia. I hunt the things that hunt civilizations. I eliminate threats before they can reach the level where conventional forces could detect them. And I wait for the day when humanity would once again reach for the stars. The display showed intervention after intervention. Dimensional parasites drawn to Earth's unique biological diversity, destroyed before they could establish beachheads. Cosmic predators attracted by the complexity of human consciousness, eliminated before they could begin their feeding cycles. Rogue AIs seeking to assimilate organic intelligence, dismantled before they could make contact with human technology. You've been protecting us this entire time, Marcus realized. I've been protecting everyone. The Supreme Hunter's form began to shift, revealing more of the human features beneath the cosmic power. Because I learned something during the First War that the current galactic civilizations have not yet discovered. Humanity isn't just another species among many. You are the key to something far greater than any single empire or confederation. The holographic display transformed one final time, showing the current state of the galaxy from a perspective that no conventional sensors could provide. Marcus could see the energy patterns that connected all living consciousness, the subtle influences that shaped the development of civilizations, the hidden threats that moved through dimensions beyond normal space-time. Every species in the galaxy has evolved to excel in specific environments, the Supreme Hunter explained. The Nexari manipulate energy fields. The Crothri excel at physical combat. The Crystallins interface with technology. But humanity alone has evolved to be generalists, to adapt, to learn, to find patterns that others cannot see. Marcus began to understand the true scope of what he was being shown. That's why you've been studying our warfare. Not because you needed to learn our tactics, but because you needed to understand how we think. Precisely. The Supreme Hunter stepped closer, and Marcus could now see that beneath the cosmic energy, the being's eyes were unmistakably human. The Devourers were defeated, but they were not destroyed. They exist in a state of quantum suspension, waiting for the moment when they can return to our dimension. And when that moment comes, it will take more than raw power to stop them. The holographic display showed probability cascades stretching across space and time. Marcus watched as potential futures unfolded, showing scenarios where the Devourers returned to find the galaxy united under human tactical doctrine. Not human rule, human thinking. The adaptive, pattern-recognizing intelligence that allowed a single species to bridge the gaps between all others. The other civilizations respect strength. The Supreme Hunter continued. They understand power hierarchies and technological superiority, but they struggle with the kind of intuitive tactical thinking that comes naturally to humans. That's why the Galactic Confederation has spent the last 1,000 years stagnating. They can maintain what they have, but they cannot adapt to truly unprecedented threats. Marcus felt the weight of destiny pressing down on him. You want me to help prepare them for the return of the Devourers? I want you to understand what humanity truly is, the Supreme Hunter corrected. You are not a weak species that needs protection. You are the solution to problems that other species cannot even comprehend. The reason I have remained alone for 50,000 years is that I have been waiting for the day when I would no longer be the only human capable of thinking beyond the limitations of conventional reality. The chamber around them began to shift again, but this time Marcus could sense the change was different. Instead of showing him historical records or future possibilities, the Supreme Hunter was preparing to share something more immediate and more dangerous. There is something you need to see, the being continued. Something that will help you understand the urgency of our situation. The walls of the chamber became transparent, revealing the void of space around them. But this wasn't the normal void that Marcus had observed from the Cosmic Sovereign. This was something else. A darkness so complete that it seemed to absorb light rather than merely lacking it. That the Devourer's prison, the Supreme Hunter explained. The quantum suspension field that has contained them for 50 millennia, and it is beginning to fail. Marcus could see cracks in reality itself, hairline fractures in the fabric of space-time that pulsed with malevolent energy. Through the gaps, he caught glimpses of something that his mind refused to process. Entities so alien and hostile that their very existence was an affront to the natural order. "How long do we have?" he asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Based on current degradation rates, perhaps 1,000 years. Maybe less if something accelerates the process. The Supreme Hunter turned to face him fully, and Marcus could see 50,000 years of solitary vigilance in those ancient human eyes. The question is whether that will be enough time for humanity to assume its rightful role in galactic affairs. Marcus felt the magnitude of the responsibility settling around him like a mantle of lead. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Return to your people. Share what you have learned, but carefully. The other species are not ready to accept the truth about humanity's past or future. Begin the process of preparation, but do it gradually. Help them understand that humans offer something unique to the galactic community." The Supreme Hunter paused, and Marcus could sense the weight of decision in the ancient being's posture. "And when the time comes, when the Devourers break free and conventional forces prove inadequate, you will help me do what must be done to save not just our galaxy, but all of existence itself." Marcus looked out at the cracks in reality, at the imprisoned entities whose return would herald the end of everything he had ever known. Then he looked back at the Supreme Hunter, the last survivor of humanity's first attempt to reach the stars, and felt something settle into place in his mind. "I understand," he said simply. "Do you?" the Supreme Hunter asked. "Do you understand that this path will likely lead to your transformation into something beyond human recognition? Do you understand that you may be forced to sacrifice everything you are to save everything that exists?" Marcus thought of Earth, of the billions of humans who had no idea their species had once spanned the galaxy. He thought of the other civilizations in the Confederation, each struggling with their own limitations and unaware of the cosmic horror waiting to devour them all. "I understand," he repeated, "and I accept." The Supreme Hunter nodded, and for a moment the cosmic energy surrounding him dimmed enough to reveal a smile that was purely, recognizably human. "Then, welcome to the real war, brother. Let us see what humanity can accomplish when it finally understands what it was meant to become. The transport beam activated again, but as Marcus prepared to return to the Cosmic Sovereign, he carried with him knowledge that would change everything. The mockery and dismissal he had faced from other species wasn't just ignorance. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of humanity's role in the cosmic order. The galaxy was about to learn that the species they had dismissed as weakest might be the only thing standing between civilization and absolute annihilation. And Marcus Chun, once mocked as inferior among giants, now bore the responsibility of preparing his people for a war that would determine the fate of existence itself. Marcus materialized on the transport pad of the Cosmic Sovereign to find the entire bridge crew waiting for him. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a blade, and he could see from their expressions that his absence had been far longer than the few minutes it had felt like aboard the Supreme Hunter's vessel. "Report," commanded Captain Zexmore, his scarred features dark with concern. "You were gone for 6 hours. We detected massive energy fluctuations from the Supreme Hunter's location. Then, nothing. What happened? 6 hours." Marcus felt a moment of disorientation as his internal chronometer tried to reconcile the time differential. Whatever dimensional space the Supreme Hunter inhabited clearly operated under different temporal laws than normal reality. "I need to speak with Commandant Veltar immediately," Marcus said, avoiding the question. "Priority Alpha communication." Dr. Kithera's bioluminescent patterns flickered with anxiety. "Marcus, you've been exposed to energy levels that should have been lethal. Our sensors detected dimensional distortions that could have torn your molecular structure apart. How are you even alive?" Marcus looked around the bridge at beings who had become his teammates, his friends, over the past weeks. They deserved to know the truth, but the Supreme Hunter's warning echoed in his mind. The other species weren't ready to accept what humanity truly represented. Revealing too much too quickly could trigger conflicts that would make the coming war with the Devourers irrelevant. The Supreme Hunter wanted to understand human psychology, he said carefully. It conducted various tests to determine how our species processes information and makes tactical decisions. I can provide a full report to High Command, but the details are classified at levels above my clearance. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the complete truth either. Commander HFY Jat's compound eyes fixed on him with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "You're different," the Crothry warrior observed. "Your posture, your breathing patterns, the way you're scanning our positions. You're moving like someone who has been combat trained by an entity that exists beyond conventional physical laws." Marcus felt a chill of recognition. The Supreme Hunter had warned him that his exposure to advanced tactical thinking would be difficult to conceal from experienced warriors. But he hadn't expected the changes to be so immediately apparent. "Priority communication established," announced the communications officer. "Commandant Veltar is online and waiting for your report." Marcus made his way to the secured communication chamber, acutely aware that every step he took was being analyzed by beings whose survival instincts had been honed by millions of years of evolution. The meeting with the Supreme Hunter had changed something fundamental about the way he moved through space, the way he evaluated his environment, the way he unconsciously positioned himself relative to potential threats and escape routes. The holographic projection of Commandant Veltar materialized as Marcus entered the chamber, their multidimensional form shifting through configurations that suggested extreme attention. "Report, Agent Chun." Marcus took a breath and began the most important briefing of his life. "The Supreme Hunter is not a hostile entity, sir. It has been protecting galactic civilization from threats that conventional forces cannot detect or engage. However, there's a massive crisis approaching that will require unprecedented cooperation between all member species of the Confederation." The Commandant's form solidified slightly. "Explain." For the next hour, Marcus provided a carefully edited version of what he had learned. He spoke of ancient threats imprisoned beyond normal space-time, of the need for new tactical approaches to unconventional warfare, of the Supreme Hunter's willingness to work with the Confederation if they could prove their readiness. What he didn't mention was humanity's true history, the nature of the Devourers, or his own transformation into something that was beginning to transcend human limitations. "Remarkable," the Commandant said when he finished. "The Supreme Hunter has agreed to provide tactical consultation for theoretical scenarios involving entities that exist outside normal physical laws. Yes, sir. But it requires a specific type of strategic thinking that may not come naturally to all species. The Supreme Hunter believes humans might serve as effective intermediaries due to our adaptability. It was a massive understatement, but it established the foundation for what would need to come next. Humanity would gradually be positioned as essential to galactic defense, not through superior technology or physical capabilities, but through unique cognitive approaches to impossible problems. Very well. Return to base with your team. You'll be debriefed by specialist teams and then assigned to the new Theoretical Threat Response Division. This conversation is classified at the highest levels. The communication ended, leaving Marcus alone with the weight of what he had just set in motion. The next phase of human integration into galactic affairs would require delicacy, patience, and careful manipulation of information. But it was the only way to prepare the galaxy for what was coming. He returned to the bridge to find his teammates engaged in intense discussion. The conversation stopped abruptly when he appeared, but he could sense the underlying tensions. Something is wrong with the human, Commander HFY was saying to Dr. Kethera. His movement patterns suggest combat conditioning at a level that should be impossible to achieve in a few hours of exposure. Perhaps the Supreme Hunter shared tactical knowledge through some form of direct consciousness interface, Dr. Nexval suggested. Many advanced species can transfer information through methods that bypass conventional learning processes. Marcus realized that his teammates were trying to rationalize the changes they observed in him, but their explanations were getting uncomfortably close to the truth. He would need to be more careful about concealing his transformation until humanity was ready for the larger revelations. The return journey to the Central System took 3 weeks, during which Marcus underwent the most intensive debriefing protocol in Confederation history. Teams of specialists from dozens of species examined every aspect of his encounter with the Supreme Hunter, searching for insights that could advance their understanding of the galaxy's most mysterious entity. Marcus provided carefully curated information, sharing tactical concepts that would help prepare the various species for unconventional threats while withholding details that could cause panic or premature action. It was a delicate balance, requiring him to think several moves ahead while appearing to cooperate fully with the investigation. But the hardest part was concealing the changes in himself. Each day, Marcus could feel his cognitive capabilities expanding in ways that defied description. Pattern recognition abilities that had once required conscious effort now operated automatically. Tactical analysis that had previously taken minutes of deliberation now occurred in microseconds. Most disturbing of all, he was beginning to perceive connections between seemingly unrelated events across vast scales of space and time. The Supreme Hunter's warning about transformation was proving to be accurate. Extended exposure to advanced tactical thinking was fundamentally altering the way his mind processed reality. After 2 weeks of debriefing, Marcus was assigned to his new position in the Theoretical Threat Response Division. The department had been hastily created following his report, tasked with developing strategies for engaging entities that operated outside conventional physical laws. His new team included some of the most brilliant tactical minds in the galaxy. Dr. Zephany, a crystalline mathematician whose body could perform calculations that required supercomputers for other species. Commander Rexall, a Vorthan probability manipulator who could intuitively predict the outcomes of complex scenarios. Senior Analyst Morgeth, a Kef strategic theorist whose fungal neural networks could process thousands of variables simultaneously. And Marcus, the human whose role was ostensibly to provide alternative perspectives on tactical problems. In reality, he was gradually introducing concepts that would prepare them for the kind of thinking required to combat the Devourers. Today's scenario involves entities that can manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, Marcus announced during their first joint exercise. Conventional weapons and defensive systems are ineffective. How do you engage an enemy that can rewrite the laws of physics in localized areas? The team worked on the problem for hours, their individual specializations combining to generate solutions that would have been impossible for any single species to achieve. But Marcus could see the limitations in their approach. They were still thinking in terms of conventional warfare, trying to apply known tactics to unknowable opponents. What if we consider the possibility that victory doesn't require direct confrontation? He suggested. If the enemy operates outside normal reality, Perhaps the solution is to deny them access to our reality entirely. Dr. Zephani's crystalline form flickered as she processed the implications. You're suggesting some form of dimensional isolation? Trapping them in spaces between normal space-time? Or better yet, Marcus continued, using their own interdimensional nature against them. If they exist partially outside our reality, they must be vulnerable to forces that operate across dimensional boundaries. The discussion that followed was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. His teammates began developing tactical frameworks that could, with further refinement, actually work against entities like the Devourers. But, more importantly, they were learning to think beyond the limitations of conventional physics. Over the following months, the Theoretical Threat Response Division became the most innovative tactical think tank in Confederation history. Their hypothetical scenarios grew increasingly complex, their solutions increasingly sophisticated. And, gradually, without realizing it, the galaxy's finest military minds were being prepared for a war that most of them couldn't yet imagine. But Marcus knew the preparation time was running out. Late at night, in the privacy of his quarters, he could feel the cracks in reality that contained the Devourers continuing to widen. The Supreme Hunter had been optimistic in estimating 1,000 years before the prison failed. At current degradation rates, they might have centuries at best. And then the first probe arrived. Marcus was in the middle of a tactical exercise when every alarm on the station began screaming. Emergency protocols activated as sensor arrays detected something that shouldn't have been possible. A distortion in space-time that was moving through the galaxy at speeds that violated every known law of physics. All personnel to emergency stations, came the announcement from Central Command. Unknown entity approaching the Kepler 442 system. Energy signature suggests interdimensional origin. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. A probe. One of the Devourers had managed to extend a portion of itself through the weakening barriers of its prison, testing the current state of galactic defenses. He rushed to the command center along with the rest of his team, where tactical displays were painting a picture of something that challenged the limits of their sensor technology. The entity, if it could be called that, appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its form shifting through configurations that organic minds couldn't fully process. Analysis suggests the entity is scanning inhabited systems, reported Senior Analyst Morgeth, her fungal networks pulsing with computational activity. It appears to be gathering information about current technological and defensive capabilities. Commander Rexall's probability manipulation abilities were providing tactical projections that grew more disturbing with each calculation. Based on movement patterns and scanning behaviors, this entity is conducting reconnaissance for a larger force. We may be looking at the advanced scout for an invasion fleet. Marcus realized that this was the moment he had been preparing for, the moment when theoretical preparation would meet actual reality. The Devourers weren't going to wait for their prison to fail naturally. They were testing the boundaries, probing for weaknesses, preparing for an early escape attempt. "We need to intercept and study this entity," he announced, his voice carrying an authority that surprised even himself. "This may be our only opportunity to understand what we're facing before the full invasion begins." Dr. Zephani's crystalline form flickered with concern. "Marcus, our theoretical scenarios assumed these entities would be contained until we had time for proper preparation. If they're already sending scouts, then we're out of time," Marcus finished. "We need to accelerate all our preparation protocols and hope that what we've developed so far will be enough." As alerts continued to scream around them, and the interdimensional scout continued its reconnaissance sweep through Confederation space, Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling around him once again. The war that had been won 50,000 years ago was about to begin anew, and this time the fate of not just humanity, but all existence hung in the balance. The galaxy had mocked the young Earthling, dismissed him as weak and inferior. But now, as cosmic horror approached from beyond the boundaries of reality itself, they were about to discover that the species they had underestimated might be the only thing standing between civilization and absolute annihilation. The real test was about to begin, and Marcus Chun, no longer quite human, but not yet something else entirely, stood at the center of a storm that would reshape the very nature of existence. The time for preparation was over. The time for war had arrived. The interdimensional scout hung in space like a tear in reality itself, its presence causing gravitational anomalies that registered on sensors across 3 star systems. For 6 days, the combined fleets of the Galactic Confederation had attempted to establish contact, deploy containment protocols, and study the entity through every means at their disposal. Every attempt had failed. The Scout wasn't hostile in any conventional sense. It simply existed beyond the reach of anything the galaxy's finest minds could devise. Weapons passed through it without effect. Communication attempts were absorbed and transformed into something that drove most AI systems into protective shutdown. Containment fields collapsed the moment they came into contact with the entity's distorted space-time signature. Marcus stood in the command center of the Cosmic Sovereign, now serving as the flagship for the Joint Confederation Response Force, watching tactical displays that grew more ominous with each passing hour. The Scout had completed its survey of 12 inhabited systems, and analysis of its scanning patterns suggested it was gathering intelligence for something far larger and more terrible than anyone had imagined. The entity has shifted position again, reported Dr. Zephany, her crystalline form flickering with the strain of processing calculations that pushed her biological computers to their limits. New trajectory places it on an intercept course with the Sol system. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Earth. The Scout was heading for humanity's homeworld, drawn by something that conventional analysis couldn't detect. But Marcus had a terrible suspicion about what that something might be. Time to intercept, he asked, though he dreaded the answer. 18 hours at current velocity, Commander Rexall replied. But our probability projections suggest the entity will accelerate as it approaches Earth. It appears to be eager to reach that particular destination. Captain Zexmore's battle scars had gone completely black with stress. We can't allow an unknown entity to reach Earth. The planet has minimal defensive capabilities compared to core Confederation worlds. Marcus stared at the tactical display, his enhanced pattern recognition abilities working to understand the Scout's behavior. The entity wasn't just randomly surveying inhabited systems. It was searching for something specific, something that had guided it unerringly toward humanity's birth world despite the vast distances involved. And suddenly, with a clarity that felt like ice water in his veins, Marcus understood what the Scout was seeking. It's looking for the Supreme Hunter, he announced, causing every being in the command center to turn toward him. The Devourers can sense their ancient enemy through their dimensional prison. The Scout isn't gathering general intelligence. It's trying to locate the being that defeated them 50,000 years ago. Dr. Kithera's bioluminescent patterns shifted to configurations that indicated profound concern. If that's true, then, the Scout's approach to Earth suggests. The Supreme Hunter is there, Marcus finished, protecting humanity's homeworld, just as it has protected our species for millennia. The implications were staggering. If the Scout succeeded in locating the Supreme Hunter, it would transmit that information back to its masters in the dimensional prison. The Devourers would focus all their efforts on breaking free, specifically to eliminate the only being in the galaxy capable of defeating them. We have to stop the Scout before it reaches Earth, Marcus declared. Not capture it, not study it, destroy it completely, even if it means sacrificing our opportunity to understand their technology. Commander HFY Jat's compound eyes fixed on him with predatory intensity. Our combined fleets have been unable to affect the entity in any meaningful way. What makes you think we can destroy something that exists outside normal reality? Marcus felt the weight of decision settling around him like a familiar cloak. The time for half-truths and careful misdirection had passed. The galaxy needed to understand what they were truly facing, even if it meant revealing secrets that could change the fundamental nature of interspecies relations. Because, he said quietly, I know how to contact the one being who can teach us to fight them. The Supreme Hunter responded to Marcus's communication with a speed that suggested it had been waiting for this moment. Within an hour of his transmission, reality began to fold around the Confederation fleet as the ancient warrior arrived to assess the situation. But this time, the Supreme Hunter didn't hide its true nature behind dimensional distortions and cosmic energy. When it materialized among the assembled warships, it appeared in a form that every being present could recognize, unmistakably, undeniably human. The communication that followed was broadcast on open channels, ensuring that every ship's crew could witness what was about to be revealed. Greetings, children of the stars. The Supreme Hunter's voice carried across space without technological assistance, speaking directly into the consciousness of every being within range. I am Kalen Voss, last survivor of humanity's first expansion, and I've been waiting 50,000 years for this moment. The reaction across the fleet was immediate and chaotic. Alien warriors who had spent their entire lives believing humans to be among the weakest species in the galaxy suddenly found themselves confronting the reality that the most powerful being in known space belonged to that same supposedly inferior race. Marcus could hear the communication chatter exploding across every channel as the implication sank in. Humanity wasn't just another member species of the Confederation. They were the descendants of the galaxy's first interstellar empire, inheritors of a legacy that predated every other civilization by tens of thousands of years. The entity approaching Earth is a scout for the Devourers, the Supreme Hunter continued, its form becoming clearer as it focused its attention on the assembled fleet. They are the beings that destroyed the first expansion, and they've spent the last 50 millennia plotting their return. The scout must be destroyed before it can report the location of Earth to its masters. Captain Zexmore found his voice first. Supreme Hunter, Kalen Voss, our weapons have proven ineffective against the entity. How do we destroy something that exists partially outside our reality? By fighting it the way humans have always fought superior opponents, the Supreme Hunter replied. Not with superior strength or advanced technology, but with superior tactics and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the survival of those who cannot defend themselves. The Supreme Hunter gestured, and the space around the fleet began to shift as dimensional barriers that had contained various exotic weapons and technologies for 50,000 years began to dissolve. I have spent 50 millennia preparing for this war, the ancient warrior announced. Every weapon, every strategy, every tactical innovation developed during the first expansion has been preserved and refined. But these tools were designed for a specific type of warfare, and they require a specific type of warrior to wield them effectively. Marcus felt a chill of premonition as the Supreme Hunter's attention focused on him. Marcus Chun, the ancient being continued, you have shown the same tactical instincts that allowed humanity to build an empire spanning the galaxy. But instinct alone will not be enough for what comes next. Are you prepared to accept the transformation necessary to become what this war requires? Marcus looked around the command center at beings who had gone from mocking him to staring at him with something approaching awe. Dr. Kithera's bioluminescent patterns were cycling through configurations that suggested she was trying to process information that challenged her fundamental understanding of galactic history. Commander HFY Jat's predatory instincts were clearly screaming that the small human they had dismissed as weak was somehow connected to the most dangerous entity in the galaxy. But more than that, Marcus could feel the eyes of his own species upon him. Earth lay directly in the path of an entity that could unravel the very foundations of reality, and the only hope for its survival required him to step beyond the boundaries of everything he had ever been. I accept, he said simply. What followed was a transformation that defied description in any language known to galactic science. The Supreme Hunter reached across dimensions, drawing on energies that existed in the spaces between realities, and began the process that would elevate Marcus from human to something that could fight beings like the Devourers on equal terms. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond the limitations of biological neural networks. His awareness stretched across space and time, allowing him to perceive the fundamental forces that held the universe together and the entities that sought to tear it apart. Most importantly, he began to understand the true nature of the tactical thinking that had made humanity unique among galactic civilizations. It wasn't just pattern recognition or adaptive intelligence. It was something deeper, an intuitive understanding of how to turn apparent weaknesses into advantages, how to find victory in seemingly impossible situations, how to sacrifice individual glory for collective survival. The transformation lasted only minutes by external time, but when it was complete, Marcus stood as something new in the galaxy's history. Still fundamentally human, but enhanced beyond the normal limitations of his species. Still connected to his people and their struggles, but capable of fighting threats that existed beyond conventional reality. Now, the Supreme Hunter said, its voice carrying new notes of satisfaction and anticipation, let us show the galaxy what humans can accomplish when they understand their true potential. The battle against the Devourer Scout took place in dimensions that most species couldn't perceive, fought with weapons that violated the known laws of physics. Marcus and the Supreme Hunter engaged the entity in a form of combat that was part tactical warfare, part philosophical argument, and part contest of fundamental wills. The scout fought as the Devourers always had, by attempting to unmake the basic structure of reality around their opponents, to reduce matter and energy to the primal chaos from which they fed. But it encountered something it had never faced before. Opponents who understood that reality was not fixed, that the laws of physics were guidelines rather than absolute constraints, and that conscious will backed by sufficient understanding could reshape the universe itself. The battle ended when Marcus discovered the scout's fundamental vulnerability. Like all Devourers, it existed partially outside normal space-time, which meant it was dependent on dimensional anchors to maintain coherence in reality. By severing those anchors through precisely targeted applications of force that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, Marcus was able to trap the entity in a state of quantum dissolution. The scout died screaming across frequencies that only beings like the Supreme Hunter could fully perceive, its destruction sending shockwaves through the dimensional prison that contained its masters. The Devourers now knew that their ancient enemy was no longer alone, that humanity had produced another warrior capable of fighting them on their own terms. In the aftermath, as the combined Confederation fleet tried to process what they had witnessed, Marcus stood with the Supreme Hunter and felt the weight of a new kind of responsibility settling around him. The war has begun, the ancient warrior observed. The Devourers will accelerate their escape attempts now that they know I have a potential successor. The galaxy has perhaps decades rather than centuries to prepare for their return. Marcus nodded, feeling the truth of it resonating through his enhanced consciousness. What do we do now? Now, the Supreme Hunter said, and for the first time in 50,000 years, its voice carried something approaching hope. We prepare the galaxy for a war they never imagined possible. We teach them that strength comes not from superior biology or advanced technology, but from the willingness to adapt, to sacrifice, and to find victory even when victory seems impossible. The Supreme Hunter turned to face the assembled Confederation fleet, where thousands of beings from dozens of species were trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. The humans you have dismissed as weak are the inheritors of the galaxy's first interstellar empire. The tactical thinking you have mocked as primitive is the same intelligence that once spanned 10,000 worlds. The adaptability you have seen as a limitation is actually the key to defeating enemies that exist beyond the reach of conventional warfare. Marcus felt the weight of expectation from every ship in the fleet, but also something else, a growing sense of recognition. The mockery was fading, replaced by understanding and, in some cases, genuine respect. From this day forward, the Supreme Hunter continued, humanity will assume its rightful place in galactic affairs, not as rulers or conquerors, but as the teachers and protectors they were always meant to be. The galaxy stands on the edge of the greatest war in its history, and it will need every advantage that human tactical thinking can provide. Over the following months, the revelation of humanity's true heritage transformed the political landscape of the Galactic Confederation. Species that had once dismissed humans as inferior found themselves requesting human tactical advisors. Military academies across the galaxy began incorporating human strategic doctrines into their curricula. And slowly, carefully, the most advanced civilizations began preparing for a conflict that would determine the fate of existence itself. Marcus found himself at the center of this transformation, no longer the mocked weakling, but a bridge between humanity's glorious past and its uncertain future. He worked with the Supreme Hunter to establish training protocols that could prepare other species for interdimensional warfare, sharing techniques that had been developed during humanity's first expansion and refined through 50 millennia of solitary preparation. But, perhaps most importantly, he began the process of preparing his own species for the revelation of their true history. Earth's governments were gradually made aware of their heritage, their responsibilities, and the cosmic conflict that was approaching. Human military commanders began training in tactics that their ancestors had used to build an empire among the stars. The transformation wasn't always smooth. Some species struggled to accept that the humans they had considered inferior were actually their intellectual superiors in matters of warfare and adaptation. Some human populations found it difficult to reconcile their understanding of history with the reality of their species' cosmic significance. But gradually, inexorably, the galaxy began to prepare for the return of the Devourers. Training exercises involving simulated interdimensional combat became routine across Confederation space. Research teams worked to develop weapons that could function in environments where the laws of physics were optional. Most importantly, joint tactical units began forming, teams that combined human strategic thinking with the specialized capabilities of other species. Marcus watched it all with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The galaxy was becoming stronger, more unified, and better prepared for unconventional threats. But he could also feel the continuing degradation of the Devourer's prison, the increasing frequency of dimensional disturbances that suggested their ancient enemies were growing more active. 1 year after the destruction of the Scout, he stood with the Supreme Hunter on the observation deck of Earth's newest orbital defense station, watching human and alien engineers work together to install weapons that could theoretically damage entities existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Do you think it will be enough?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward the construction activity below. "It will have to be," the Supreme Hunter replied. "The Devourers broke free from their prison 3 hours ago." Marcus felt the words hit him like a physical blow. "What?" "I've been tracking dimensional disturbances across 17 sectors," the ancient warrior continued calmly. "The prison failed faster than our worst-case projections suggested. The Devourers are currently reconstituting themselves in the spaces between galaxies, gathering strength for their assault on reality itself." The magnitude of the threat was almost impossible to comprehend. Entities that could unmake the fundamental structure of existence were loose in the universe. And, despite a year of preparation, Marcus wasn't certain that the galaxy's combined forces would be enough to stop them. "How long do we have?" "Based on their reconstitution patterns, perhaps 6 months before they can mount a coordinated assault." "But Marcus..." The Supreme Hunter paused, and Marcus could sense the weight of 50,000 years of loneliness in that hesitation. "I want you to know that having a brother in this fight changes everything. For 500 centuries, I believed I was the last of my kind, the final guardian standing between the galaxy and annihilation." The ancient warrior turned to face him, and Marcus could see human emotions written clearly across features that had transcended normal biological limitations. "But you've proven that humanity's greatest strength was never physical prowess or technological superiority. It was the ability to inspire others, to find common ground between disparate peoples, to forge alliances that transform weakness into strength. In 1 year, you've accomplished what I couldn't achieve in 50,000. You've united the galaxy against a common threat." Marcus looked out at the bustling activity around Earth's orbital defenses, where beings from dozens of species worked together with a unity of purpose that would have been impossible before humanity's true heritage was revealed. "We're not going to fight them the way you've fought them before," Marcus realized. "We're going to fight them as one galaxy, with every species contributing their unique strengths under human tactical coordination." "Exactly." The Supreme Hunter's ancient features showed the first genuine smile Marcus had ever seen from a being. "The Devourers remember me as a single warrior who barely defeated them through sacrifice and transformation. They're not prepared for what happens when humanity's tactical genius is multiplied across thousands of species and billions of minds." The final battle, when it came, exceeded every simulation and exceeded every preparation. The Devourers emerged from the spaces between realities as a force of pure entropy, seeking to reduce the galaxy's carefully ordered civilizations to the primordial chaos they found familiar. But they encountered something unprecedented in their vast experience, a defense coordinated by minds that could adapt faster than entropy itself could spread. Human tactical doctrines allowed each species to maximize their unique capabilities while maintaining perfect coordination with allies whose biology and psychology were radically different from their own. Christity warriors fought alongside gaseous Nexari, their combined abilities creating tactical possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. Crystalline computers provided processing power that allowed human strategists to coordinate battles across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Most importantly, the galaxy fought with a unity of purpose that transformed their individual limitations into collective strength. Marcus found himself at the center of the largest military coordination in galactic history. His consciousness expanded across space, and time to simultaneously manage battle groups, fighting entities that existed in 17 dimensions at once. He could feel the Supreme Hunter fighting alongside him, their combined tactical awareness creating a strategic intelligence that could match the Devourer's cosmic malevolence. But the real victory came not through superior individual prowess, but through something the Devourers had never encountered in their eons of existence: the willingness of thousands of species to sacrifice their individual glory for the survival of civilization itself. The war lasted 3 days and reshaped the fundamental nature of the galaxy. When it was over, the Devourers had been destroyed so completely that even the spaces they had occupied between realities were sealed against their potential return. And humanity, no longer mocked as weak or inferior, stood recognized as the species that had saved existence itself. Marcus stood once again with the Supreme Hunter, this time on a monument built to commemorate the greatest victory in galactic history. Around them, representatives from every member species of the Confederation worked together with a cooperation that would have been unimaginable before the war. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now," the Supreme Hunter replied, "the real work begins. We've proven that the galaxy can stand united against ultimate threats. The challenge will be maintaining that unity during the peace that follows." Marcus nodded, understanding the wisdom in those words. Wars could forge alliances, but maintaining them required a different kind of strength entirely. "Will you stay?" he asked. "Help guide what we built here." The Supreme Hunter was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the bustling activity of a galaxy that had learned to see beyond the limitations of individual species. "For 50,000 years, I believe my purpose was to be the galaxy's guardian," the ancient warrior finally said. "But I understand now that my real purpose was to prepare the way for something greater. A civilization where strength comes not from individual superiority, but from collective wisdom." The Supreme Hunter turned to face Marcus with an expression of profound satisfaction. The galaxy no longer needs a guardian standing apart from civilization. It needs teachers, guides, and protectors who are part of civilization itself. Humanity has found its true calling among the stars, and I am honored to call you brother. As Marcus looked out at the galaxy his species had helped to unite and protect, he reflected on the journey that had brought him from mocked recruit to one of the most important figures in galactic history. The other species had learned that true strength came not from physical superiority or technological advancement, but from the kind of adaptable intelligence that could turn any disadvantage into victory. And humanity had learned that their greatest destiny lay not in ruling over other species, but in helping them become the best versions of themselves. The young Earthling who had once been dismissed as weak now stood as proof that the galaxy's greatest strength had always been its diversity, and that humanity's role was to help that diversity become unity in the face of any threat that might emerge from the darkness between the stars. The mockery had ended. The Brotherhood had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.